Oh my gods, y'all. If you like Greek mythology, you have got to check this book out. Just saying. Let's go. Time for another book review, finally. I don't know about y'all that read and write, but sometimes when I get really hyper focused on creating my own world, I have way less time and apparently mental capacity to be reading other people's or watching other people's imaginations unfurl before me. I'm just too focused in my own stories, characters, whatever. But I am still reading a few things. I'll get to those eventually to share my thoughts on what I'm reading now with y'all. But yeah, it's just taking a lot longer to get through that process. That said, I recently, literally just last night, finished the audiobook for Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. I do not have a physical copy of this because again, I just listened to the audiobook. I think this might be her like most recent book release. At least what I was seeing online, it looks like the paperback isn't even going to be available to purchase until like February next year, which kind of sucks. I do not like hardback books, hardcover books. I don't know, it's not my thing. If I can wait for paperback, I totally will. So I'm really glad I got to listen to the audiobook. Also because the audiobook of this is read by the author, Natalie Haynes. And so you're really getting like exactly the way that she was seeing this when she wrote it. Like the tones, her way of talking for the characters is just like it's great. And it seems like she does a lot of her own like reading for her own audiobooks, at least what I'm looking at, because I just started another one by her, because I realized like she might very well become a favorite author of mine, after getting through some of these books, because this was amazing. Let's get into this because I have a lot of thoughts. I really, really enjoyed this. I definitely will be buying the book when it comes out in paperback because I'm absolutely going to want to reread it. So, this is technically a Medusa retelling. And obviously, her and her head feature in a few different myths. There's a few different versions, at least like main well known versions of Medusa, at least like her origins and things like that. And I think that like that's like one of my first points is I think Natalie Haynes does a really good job of kind of bringing those two origin stories, the one from Ovid, and the one from like the original older Greek myths, before Ovid. She really does a good job, I think, of bringing those together and kind of marrying what happens. Full disclosure, I have been writing kind of my own short story Medusa retelling. Like, I don't know if I'll ever publish it, but like kind of just for fun because that's how I found this book. Medusa is one of my favorite mythological figures from Greek mythology. It's not exactly the way that I was, or that I have kind of been going about it in my own retelling, but I really, really like how Natalie Haynes did it. And I mean, it's kind of good that everyone has their own perspectives, right? That's why no matter how many times you retell something, it still can be fresh in different ways. And this was definitely really fresh. I think for sure one of the things that I really appreciated about it, and it seems again from looking at the other books that this author has written, it seems like she likes to take old Greek myths and retell them from predominantly the feminine perspectives, which is one reason that I'm a huge fan of Philippa Gregory, which you can't even see behind me, but I have like her entire Plantagenet and Tudor series behind me, and that's one of the reasons I love her as a historical fiction author, is because she tells the stories of the women who don't get to be heard really in the originals. And Natalie Haynes does the same thing for sure in this book, and the one that I've just started, A Thousand Ships, I think is going to be the same kind of vibe. But it's predominantly from the perspectives of the goddesses, the like kind of lesser deities. I mean, they still are referred to as goddesses, but things like the Nereids and that weren't necessarily really like worshipped in the same level as like the Olympians and things like that. Yeah, I really, really liked getting their perspectives. I feel like the little bit of information that we get from the original myths about these, some of these characters especially, like I think she did a really good job figuring out kind of what their voices would be like, what their perspectives would feel like. And it was this really, really interesting blend of both like comedy as well as like just like sad and dramatic, kind of just emotional, dark, like a lot of, I mean, obviously the story of Medusa is messed up and really sad. And if you're getting a story from her perspective, she kind of goes through some things, right? And so there's definitely moments like that, but there's so much humor as well. Like I literally laughed out loud multiple times listening to this. Part of that could have been because of how the author was reading her own work and like having such a good voice, but also just in general I feel like the way that she writes these characters, they just like really jump off the page and feel so real. And she modernizes it. So it is set in ancient Greece, but she modernizes it to where it's definitely more understood and like digestible for a modern audience. And I thought that was really, really cool. I just wanted to give you kind of an example of how many different perspectives we get in this book. You ready? Hang on a sec. I need a sip of coffee. Okay. So we get perspectives, not necessarily in this order. Again, I don't have the physical book, so I'm just going off of memory of listening to all this. But we get perspectives from Hera, Zeus briefly. I think he maybe gets like a little tiny bit in his, kind of from his perspective. But Amphitrite, Poseidon's wife, I really liked both her and Hera a lot. I'll get back to that. We do get some perspectives from the Nereids, or like one specific Nereid, even though like, and it is a joke that is like made fun of in the books, but it's like, you know, we don't really know all of the Nereids' names because there was 50 of them. So we get like one of them kind of talking. Let's see. We also get perspectives, obviously, from Medusa herself, from both of her sisters, Steno and Euryales. That's at least how she says it in this. When I was working, or when I have been working on my own, like, Medusa retelling, I actually Googled how to pronounce Euryales' name, and the way that it said on the thing, it sounded like Ephraeli. So I don't know, but the way the author says it is Urieli in the audiobook, so we're just gonna go with that. Although I do think the actual like pronunciation is prettier in my personal opinion. We also get perspectives briefly, again, more than Zeus, but we do get a few perspectives from Poseidon. Later on down the road from Danae, I think is how they said it. Perseus' mother. We do get some perspectives from Perseus, eventually Cassiopeia, Andromeda, and then we even get a brief chapter near the end from Iadome, which, if you don't know who she is, her myth, she's literally in like one myth, but we get an actual like chapter from her perspective, and it's really interesting. There's more than one moment in this book where it's a retelling, so we're kind of getting like, oh, this is what you were told. Yeah, I heard this is what you heard about this, but here's what actually happened. And it's kind of one of those moments with Iadome. And it also is like one of those dark humor kind of moments. If you know who Iadome is in the myth, you probably will understand what I'm saying. But anyway, I don't want to, this is supposed to be spoiler free because this book was really, really good. And I definitely think that if you are into Greek mythology, you should read it. I really appreciate how Natalie Haynes wove all of these different myths leading up to and a little bit after, surrounding the time of and a little bit after Medusa, like her birth, her like life, how she dies. We even get perspectives from the Gorgon Aeon, which, if you know the myths, I don't think it's a spoiler, but you know what happens to Medusa. And the Gorgon Aeon is kind of like her head gets put into Athena's like breastplate, I think is kind of what it's supposed to be, at least if I remember the like imagery. So I wanted to talk a little bit as well about some of the characters that I found the funniest or really appreciated their perspectives for whatever reason. I thought they were all incredibly well done, but I especially really loved being in the perspective of both Hera and Amphitrite. I thought Hera was funnier because she was depicted as very sassy and like manipulative, but in like not nearly as good of a manipulator as Amphitrite. Amphitrite is, you know, a sea goddess. I think she is a Nereid, right? So she's she is very calming and soothing to Poseidon, but that's how she manipulates him. She like doesn't want to piss him off because he has a temper, right? But she knows how to like play with him and get him to do what she wants. And I loved like seeing how well done that was. Hera is also, like I said, very manipulative with Zeus, but because of her temper, she's not as good at hiding it. The birth of Athena is actually one of the myths that gets retold in this story because, of course, Athena has a lot to do with Medusa's story. And there's a particular scene in there where Zeus has this horrible headache because he's, brain pregnant with Athena, and he is trying to get Hephaestus to chop his head open to figure out what's going on, release the pressure. And Hera is like, to Zeus, Hera is like, are you sure you really want to have your head hacked open? And then she turns to her son, Hephaestus, and she's like, I think it's a marvelous idea. And then back to Zeus, and she's like, I'm just not really sure it's going to help with your headache. And I swear to God, I was just like dying when I heard this. Like, there's so many moments like that where it's just like the sass of the characters, or she's really good also at like I don't know what else to call it, but like the god humor or like the immortal humor, specifically immortal beings who have never been human before, because they their perspectives are so vastly different because time passes differently for them. They can't die, they don't really get hurt. So the way that they see things in comparison to the way the mortals see things is, again, just amazing character voice. I love how like the gods don't really change, like, because again they age differently, they experience things differently, they are personifications for specific things, so they don't really have like character arcs in the same way, but they're so fun to read from, because they are so like different, but also still so very human. I also thought Athena was funny, but like in this very like petulant, childish kind of way, which totally does make sense if you know the myths of Athena. She is, Zeus's favored daughter, right? So she's very spoiled. Frankly, she's always been one of my least favorite of the Greek goddesses because she's very misogynistic, right? And a part of that, I think, is very symbolic from the original myth because she was like born from Zeus's brain, right? But something that I actually forgot about until listening to this is that she did have a mother. She wasn't just conceived from only Zeus. Her mother, oh my God, I'm trying to remember her mom's name now, and I can't. But her mother was one of those many unfortunate goddesses who was attacked by Zeus. I'm not even going to say the word. Attacked by Zeus, got pregnant, and then Hera got pissed off and was like, you gotta handle this situation. So Zeus went and ate this goddess, like literally ate her. And she didn't survive that. She, I guess, got digested or whatever happens when you get eaten by a god. Um, but he ended up. It's really not funny. The way that that point is actually portrayed in the book is like honestly really sad and dark. It is messed up. So again, it's this blend of like weird, funny stuff going on, strange situations, but also like really sad and dark. But yeah, so that's how he gets pregnant with Athena. And I do think that adding that little bit, and then when we get later on, we get perspectives from Athena, and it's very subtle, but I really liked how it kind of dives more into like the psychology of Athena. It's not just that she's like got all this internalized misogyny because she's like of Zeus's mind and his ideal, like what a woman should be or whatever, which is kind of how I always interpreted her. But I think that there's this extra, like, very subtle layer that she gives Athena that's like, well, it's almost got this like bitterness that she never had a mother. She almost has this like, she has mommy issues. It's really, I don't know how else to put it, but I loved it. It was really insightful and I thought like really well thought out. I also like how this is like a very like character driven kind of story. I'm realizing the more I talk about it. But I really love how it's also has this like sympathetic tone to it when it comes to like the monsters, because it's not just Medusa, but her sisters are terrifying to mortals, but they don't understand that. They talk about Ceto, their mother, who is like the deep sea goddess, who is like the mother of monsters, right? They talk about Phorcys, who is their father, who is also a monster, and he's like the Greek god of like the the danger of the ocean, right? Like mysteries and scary things in the ocean. And so those are the parents of the Gorgons. And so it talks about them. You don't really get their perspectives, but it does talk about them because they are they're interesting figures. I'm not even going to fall down that rabbit hole. This video is getting long enough. But it talks about things from like this sympathetic perspective of like, well, you're scared of us because you find us hideous or whatever, but you're not actually looking at us as if we're like people like you are. It also is like, it talks about the Graiae, the fates, essentially, you know, and like how unpleasant it must have been from their experience having to like share one eye and one tooth. Like, but again, it's really, really funny. Like, it kind of, how could it not be? Some of this stuff is just really out there, you know what I mean? This is not a like genre or like subgenre that I have read much of. Pretty much anything I've ever read of Greek mythology has been more like this is the actual myth, if not actually reading like the Iliad, the Odyssey, Ovid, whatever, right? So I'm used to just like the classical myths. I think this is actually the first like more modernized Greek myth retelling I've ever read. I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. It was so fun. I don't know if all of these types of retellings are as good of like finding all the surrounding myths and weaving them together in this like coherent kind of way. But Natalie Haynes definitely did an amazing, amazing job with that, in my personal opinion. There were stories that like it's like the way that that the timeline and everything. Maybe it's just because I'm working on my own like fantasy series timeline right now, but so many different things, so many different character perspectives, and how they're all interacting, how they all feel about these different things going on. Just masterful, masterful. Highly recommend if you're a Medusa fan, if you're just a Greek mythology fan, if you are into the like feminist perspectives or spins on these older stories. All of those things, you should absolutely read this book. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It was an amazing read. I have already started, or I guess listen, I've already started listening to the audiobook for her book, A Thousand Ships. So I might be making a video about that really, really soon, because again, I'm just listening to the audiobook while I'm like working. It's just easier for me right now. But yeah, Natalie Haynes is amazing. Just go read her stuff. Mythology is like the original fantasy, right, of our ancestors, so I am a huge fan about it. So if you have any other like really good Greek myth retellings, or whether it's Greek or not, I don't care. Any myths work for me. But if you have any good retellings, please drop them down below. I would love, love, love to check them out. Again, if you have not read anything by Natalie Haynes, big recommend. I will probably again be talking to you guys real soon about this other book of hers that I am now listening to. As I said, I do think this is one of her newer, or if not newest, books that she has published, and it looks like she has a few other ones coming out sometime next year as well. So I'm really excited. I'm definitely going to be stocking up on some of her stuff. Highly suggest y'all do too. So if you liked this video and want to see more like this, please like, share, subscribe, all the stuff, and happy reading. I'll see y'all very soon.